Bro, why do they look like that? Why do they look like that? Why do they look like that? Zouken is a nasty, nasty man, dude. Yo, YouTube, it's your boy Les. I'm back again with the YouTube video. Now listen, this was suggested by someone in the Discord. Zouken's worm Magecraft is vile and disgusting. Now, I mean, for those of you who've watched Phase Zero and kind of know about Zouken base level, yeah, 100%. Absolutely disgusting, bro. Nasty piece of work Zouken is, and his worms. I kind of want to know why he uses worms. Why is worms his thing? You know, and hopefully this video might like give us some kind of explanation of that and how crazy the worms can get. So yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this video, so let's get into it. Let's get it. Let's go.
So we hear a lot about this. We see the effects that it has on different members throughout the cast, but rarely do we explore just how vile Zouken's worm Magecraft truly is. I think one of the bigger resounding questions is, why did he pick this Magecraft in particular?
That's the $1 million question I want to know. Why? I wonder if it has something to do with him being able to stay kind of immortal. Kind of. Well, no, he's not immortal. He's always wanted, but like maybe it allows him to live longer because he's always trying to find immortality, right? So maybe that's the reason why the worms allow that.
Out of all the other things he could have chose, he chose to use worms. And it's not really a common foundation either. From the outside looking in, you would think, oh, this wouldn't be that effective to Zouken, but he found a way to make it work. One of the core reasons for this is him trailing behind and following the Iceburn Witch and wanting to help out with that. Now, the Iceburns are homunculi, so they're gonna be around regardless. But Zouken, if he wants to remain a part of this, that's a whole different case. You know, he came all the way to Japan from Russia, and he realized very early that if he wanted to achieve this goal, he would have to extend the natural expectancy of his body. And there's many different ways to do this, but in his mind, the most practical ended up being the worms. I feel like they were just a lot less of a hassle to deal with in the moment. So going back to Phase Zero, right off the bat, you got Karya the bozo dragging himself back in after he's...
This guy really doesn't like Karya, bro. He really doesn't like him. I mean, I get it. He made some good points in one of the videos we watched.
Left the household. He has no mage experience, and now he wants to participate in the war because he's a good guy. The story lets us know that he's already aware of the devious methods of Zouken's Magecraft as part of the reason why he left. But he also knows that just like Zouken, he needs this to get where he needs to go. Now, mind you that when Karya was asking him to teach him about the worm Magecraft, this was a year before the Fourth Grail War kicked off, before the Masters got selected. So automatically, this lets us know that this style, at the very least, is extremely efficient in terms of speed, which again would explain why Zouken picked it up. For a person to walk in with zero experience, and then you're telling me that in less than a year, this Magecraft can get them up to par, perhaps even better, it's a no-brainer. That speaks volumes. You know, off the top of my head, practicing projection for a year wouldn't help the average person. Practicing gem Magecraft for a year wouldn't help the average person. Necromancy, because things like that are very precise, so it trumps in that category. When he does this, we immediately see him inject Karya with his crest worms. These are the worms that he uses that allows his Magecraft to take effect in someone else's body. The worms go in and they expand the magic circuits that are already there. That's their main thing. Karya already had good potential, so he just needed the worms to make up the difference. Despite the fact that he did leave, he was built for being a mage. That's one of the reasons why Zouken was so frustrated with him. Now, when it comes to Zouken's magic crest, which is his crest worms, they operate differently. I've seen people talk about how, you know, the original magic crest has a very low compatibility rate when it comes to...
Bro, why did these worms be looking weird as hell? They're looking so spermy too.
In your lineage, it's highly likely that that transplant won't work and it just might kill them. I've also seen people argue that the reason why Zouken chose to use these worms is that it would boost the compatibility rate and make this less likely to happen. But one of the first things that Karya brings up in the novel is that he would be more compatible than Zouken trying to use Sakura, and he knows that because he's from the family. So it's less about being compatible, because as he stated, this could easily go just as wrong as any other transplant. The thing about Zouken's transplant is that it allows him to maintain control. The core function of these crest worms, all of them, they all go back to Zouken, which is something that's unfamiliar to most people handing off a crest. Sometimes people might hand off a crest in parts, sometimes they might hand off the whole thing, but ideally they are handing it off. But the way that Zouken's crest operates, it allows him to maintain all the power even when he passes his Magecraft off. He knows what you're doing, he knows where you are, and he can invade your system and cause you to suffer even more. And that's a lot of what was happening in the Fourth Grail War. It can make you irrational just from being there. Now, this had nothing to do with Karya's selfish intentions. Those were always there. But I will admit that they certainly didn't help. So looking at this, it's fair to say that Zouken is a very researched man. I mean, why wouldn't he be?
Yeah.
How could you get to this level without it? How could you reach limited immortality without it and survive this long? Assumably with no assistance. I've never heard of anybody helping Zouken to get him to where he is, in terms of Magecraft at least. All of this is presented to be his doing. So again, that says a lot. Now that Karya has come back.
That was Prilia. How do you pronounce that, by the way, chat? Did I pronounce that right? Oh, okay. I think we will be watching that. Given that we are going to be finishing Lord Elmaloy on Tuesday, right, chat?
Zouken feels obligated to put him through the ringer and make him suffer for leaving the family high and dry. He made him suffer through the worms, he made him suffer through turning Lancelot into a berserker. All of this would go hand in hand. And just to show how crucial the invasion of these worms are, when Karya first asked Zouken to do this, he said, well, I'll just let your body be a training ground for the worms for about a week. I don't expect you to last longer than that. If you can last longer than a week, I might take you serious. So this isn't something for the faint of heart in any way. You would think for somebody to use this type of Magecraft, they'd have to be insane. But it's like, okay, to reach the pinnacle of any Magecraft, you gotta be at least a little insane, right? It's just like acquiring wealth. There's a level that's respectable, and that level is likely just above average. But to be phenomenal, most of the time you have to sacrifice a little humanity for that.
True.
And I'm thinking about Shiro when I say this, but this really goes for anybody that just goes super hard on one focus. The lords at the clock tower, the cryptors, Darius, you gotta really push that threshold. So as much as I'd like to say that he's crazy, at a certain point, everybody's crazy. Because I can guarantee you that nobody's shooting to be mediocre. It's like, yeah, I can't wait to be the most mediocre mage around. Nobody's saying that. Everybody's shooting to be the best they can. Otherwise, why shoot at all? Zouken is crazy though, don't be fooled. But it's not for that reason, it's how he does it. The story does make mention that once these worms get inside you, you will become Zouken's puppet. If not literally, then figuratively. And we're gonna get into that later with Sakura. It tells us that even if Karya managed to somehow survive the Fourth Grail War, his flesh will be devoured by the worms by the time that the year was over.
Ew.
At best, he was only expected to live a few years after that. Now, this is something that's narrated, by the way. This is not something that was told.
I wonder if Karya even knew that. Right? Because he was doing this all to get into the good graces of, what's her name? And so, if he knew that, even if he did win the Holy Grail War, if he knew that he was going to die in about 6 months to a year's time, would he have even done this in the first place? I don't know.
A few years after that. Now, this is something that's narrated, by the way. This is not something that was.
He did know, and he still went ahead with it. Yeah, Karya, you was on some shit, bro. Like, what? Did you think this everything was just gonna work out and it'll be fine?
told directly to Karya, but I'm sure he got the picture regardless. And honestly, by that point, I don't even think surviving was on his mind unless he had some type of silly goal of winning the war, wishing for good health so he can look like the hero and they can all be some type of happy family.
Right,
Who knows?
Surely that's what he was aiming
so
for.
We continued to progress throughout the war, and now the worms are starting to take the shape and function like actual magic circuits themselves, which is a good thing because that means that they're working, and that's one of their other functions. They can function like artificial magic circuits. But this also means that the worms are now what's keeping Karya alive, so he's stuck to them. And this is around the time where he did in fact get selected by the Grail to be a master a year later. There's a specific moment in Stay Night that this reminds me of, and it's where we find that Shiro was using his magic circuits in the wrong way. He was using his actual nerves instead of flipping the switch for his circuits and leaving them on. So Rin was teaching him how to do this effectively. Karya is kinda in the same position. The very nature of him activating these worms to do anything means that the worms are going to get riled up, and when they get riled up, they're gonna rip at his organs. They're gonna do anything they can to get the energy that they need, which really puts you in a catch-22 because you're sitting here trying to go all out, but if he does too much, then the worms are just gonna eat him alive from the inside. He had to walk the balance, which is another reason why Sakura was tense a lot, because she always had to walk that balance as to not aggravate the worms, and she honestly had way more going on. So yeah, every time he tried to do something,
I didn't think about that, how the worms could have really like changed her character. Like why was she so timid? And it really could have been the worms. Like I wonder how different Sakura would have been without the worms obviously embedded into her, which is crazy to say, but because you always knew Zouken was kind of watching, like that obviously changed the way she acted and her character in it. So without the worms, who would have Sakura been? You know?
Every time Lancelot tried to do something, it was tearing him apart. He also spit some of these out. And what this shows is that these worms are growing, they're breeding inside of him because they aren't the same ones that you normally see. There's also a point where Karya said, well, if I'm going against my nemesis, you can devour my entire body. I don't care. I just want enough power to beat him. And of course, he's talking about Tokiomi. So Tokiomi is your nemesis now, even though a bunch of people have this headcanon that it wasn't that dramatic. Yeah, okay. So around the part where Tokiomi starts to enter the picture, the worms have gotten mature enough to be sent out as his familiars. You have these maggot-like worms that are described to be the size of mice start to transform into beetle variants. And we've run into this quite a bit. We've seen them in FGO, in the Fate Excel event. It's stated that though they may look small, these worms are carnivorous and they will eat an entire bull and crush his bones in literal seconds. They're practically like insect piranhas. And despite all that, Tokiomi just tore straight through him with this.
You can go on front row seats when shit clap cheeks. Oh yeah, that's true. I bet he was sapping all that mana transfer too, bro. He's just like, yeah, worms, latch onto that mana transfer still. He needs that. That's good food. Yo, Zouken is sick, dude. What a sick man.
Flames didn't even break a sweat. But I will say that Tokiomi did get lucky because he was a lot more equipped for that fight than the average person. He had flames. We all know that insects are weak to flames by default. It's likely that this would not have been as easy if Tokiomi didn't have these different elements to toss around. But fortunate for him, he had this at his disposal. Then we see a new development when Tokiomi burns him alive and he ends up making it back to the underground cage with the worms, thanks to Kirei healing him. Zouken points out that the worms were starting to heal his burned body. So these worms can even provide healing capabilities at the cost of the internal strife that's going on inside. Everything just goes back to that. And they were healing him extremely fast too. This could be because Karya was their nest, so they're treating him especially with proper care, because as long as he goes on, they do too.
Yeah.
This is also a point where Zouken decides, well, you're already down and out, I might as well be the one to give you a boost. So he punches Karya in the throat with his cane, forces him to open up his mouth, and inside goes one of his huge lust worms. And it says that the worm buried off into his stomach and started to revitalize him with energy. That's not even the worst part about this worm. The worst part is that this was the same worm that took Sakura's innocence. And like I said before, things like this is what makes Zouken sick. Karya was benefiting not only off of the worm that took her, but also took her soul away. Again, these lust worms, they operate different.
Bro, why do they look like that? Why do they look like that? Why do they look like that? Zouken is a nasty, nasty man, dude. Chat, they're so thick too. God damn. Crazy question, but would Sakura still get pregnant after her cheeks got clapped? Like, wouldn't the worm suck all the milk? That's what I'm thinking, bro. Like, do the worms know what's happening? And so the worms that are just currently in the womb just be like, do you know what? Let's just make her like a, let's make a gap for this niggas. Let's make a gap. Hold on, like, yeah, they're like, let's make a gap real quick so you can get that shit off. Or they're like, what's this new worm coming in and out of the womb? Like what the other worms are looking at the other worms like, do you know this nigga, bro? He keeps coming in and coming back out. Like, who's this worm? Like, is he a friend of yours? Like, bro, do you know what? Yo, Blade, what's good, bro? The fuck I joined to? Bro, you don't even want to know. You don't even want to know. Of course, I got fluids coming out of them too. Exactly, bro. Do you know how crazy that is? Do you know how nuts that is? The fact that they got teeth already is throwing me off. Because, and it's not even like sharp teeth, chat. It's like, it's really like a good set of teeth, bro. Like, they've got a good set of normal ass human teeth on them. Not no sharp insecty teeth. Man.
That took her, but also took her soul away. Again, these lust worms, they operate differently. They feed off blood, semen, and bone marrow, and nerves. Man, I mean, it's disgusting. If you've been through it, the original format, the appearance of these worms, they look like penises. They're literally drawn to look like penises,
bruh,
which further pushes the point of what they're for. So it's rather ironic that the same energy that's giving him a boost was the same thing that brought Sakura down, which is a shot not just at his physical,
crazy,
but his
child.
mental as well. Later on, the story starts to tell us that Karya's body is actually disabled, and the only reason that he's able to move is because of the worms at this point. By the end of the war, most of the worms had died off because of Lancelot abusing the energy over and over again. They couldn't take it, and Zouken is just sitting back monitoring all of this, because again, Zouken is the
Semen
worms
suckers is
himself,
crazy work,
so he
bro.
can do that. And then
Crazy
of course
work.
you have the
Semen
scene
suckers,
right
you know.
before his death with Karya and Sakura, and this showcasing, if you disobey Zouken, this is what's gonna happen to you. This is the future that lies ahead for her if she ever tried to go against his word, which is fine. It makes sense that she wouldn't go against him. One thing that I gotta get back into is something concerning Sakura. I didn't want to jumble up the storylines and go back and forth. So the moment that Sakura got to the Zouken household, when they made the trade, she got sent straight down to the worm pit, and she was down there getting abused by those lust worms. Zouken mentioned that she was crying for the first 3 days, and by the 4th day, complete silence. And that's where you see this soulless appearance come from. The thing about this is that it was merely a test. He didn't believe that she would survive half a day. But to him, the fact that she was able to make it that far, he's like, well, at least she's not defective. What? Yo, this dude is abominable. Like, actually.
Diabolical, bro.
So yeah, Sakura would lay in the pit with these worms covered from head to toe, and then she would go back to regular scheduled programming. And then you got people telling her that what she was going through wasn't that big of a deal. I guess. Couldn't do
He's
anything
saying
about
that.
it. All is a part of her being Zouken's catalyst. That's the craziest thing. Zouken was just using her to be a vessel. He didn't even end up using her to become a fighter. This is a pain far worse than Karya's, because at least with Karya, it came to an end. With Sakura, this is something that she had to endure her entire life and then some. Karya went through what he went through for a year, the few weeks that the war took place, and then it was over with. Sakura went through this for 11 years straight. So now we can bring this over to Stay Night, and this gets deeper off into the lust worms. It lets us know that these lust worms will invade the skin with their mucus and destroy the person's nerves via pleasure once they get stimulated. So it's a continuous thing, and this is why she was always trying to get down with Shiro. It wasn't just for the sake of doing it. She needed this because if they didn't get the magical energy that they needed, they would start tearing at her insides too, the same way that they were doing with Karya. So she had to deal with that on top of being violated by the worms. This doesn't even include, you know,
that makes sense in Heavensville, bro.
Doing what he did.
Because I remember in Heavensville, I think it was Heavensville, where you figured it was the worms, but you didn't know why. Like, she was just on Shiro, bro. She was just like, yeah, I need that. And I mean, he ended up giving that. But she was pressing him hard on it. I'm like, hold on, man. Like, you don't normally act like this. It's crazy. So I guess that makes sense. Yo, Zouken, man. Man, and that nigga Zouken's probably alive somewhere as a worm. Trying to plot his way back. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like this nigga never dies, really. He's always got a plan B to his plan C to his plan. Do you know what I mean? I'll never forget that it stated that the worms go out of the way to control the nervous system and make man feel pain, and women get super horny. What? What the fuck? Oh, shit opened up. Bro, it's crazy. The VN has like 8 H scenes with only 3 not being Sakura. Damn. Bro, Sakura gets it so bad in these fate things, man. Bro, Sakura's just there to get abused, bro. It seems like in these fate stories, dude. She actually gets no type of break. Literally.
Several times throughout Stay Night, you go back to this worm pit and we get a better look at it. It's an entire pit that's full of stone. It's got stone walls with holes in them, and this is their natural breeding ground. This is where he keeps all of his worms. It's said to look almost infinite. The average human being, if they came down here, they wouldn't even last a minute. And it shows us that when Zouken takes form, he basically assimilates the worms and becomes whole. They start to eat at the bottom of his body, and this is what gives his body form. And keep in mind that this body is just his avatar. Zouken is truly made up of worms, and he's mentioned this constantly, that he's always in need of more. He tells us that the ones that he has in his basement will last him for at least the next 100 years. Zouken's worm pit is really what solidifies the route turning into Heaven's Field. You know, in the other 2 routes, it didn't really have any involvement except for the few scenes with Shinji and Gil. And even from the movie, when you look through the visions of Sakura, you can see these huge arachnoid variants, or the—
I don't remember seeing that in the movie. Get the fuck out of here. Bro, there's variants of this. Oh my god, look at that. That is so, man. Zouken is the man who went from insane, from immortality, forgetting his goals, and only trying to continue his existence by any means necessary. That's very true. Because all of this started off with him wanting to find immortality. But at the end of the day, it just ended up him just trying to survive and trying to stay as long as he, like, live as long as he can, bro. Yeah, that's crazy.
These huge reptile-like worm variants that we haven't even seen yet. And these lust worms, they also have different functions between men and women. The main thing for the men is that they get their bones crushed and they get their brains sucked. And then for the women, they like to attack the woman's nerves. And they have this natural disposition towards the woman's womb because that's their general makeup. Who writes this? and then they
For
proceed
real?
to give the woman orgasms
Who
that
thinks of
fries her
this?
brain, and then they go throughout her body, go to the womb, find the placenta, and they consume that as well. But yeah, when it comes to the basement, this is his magical workshop. And if you look at these holes, they're more like chambers, and that's because these chambers are where he stores his victims and leaves their bodies to be decomposed by the worms. One thing that it really gets into is that even if Zouken were to remove the worms by the point of stay night, Sakura would still go down because of the grail fragments. So they have to be there because they're fused with the worms, and the worms are operating as her artificial circuits now. But he claims that he hasn't been doing anything to her up until this point in time, that she's mostly breaking down from being the second grail vessel. Cav. Another part that we have is one of the ones involving Kirei, where he explains that insects are actually the lowest ranked familiars that you can have, and the only thing that they can really do is tell the master if the host is still alive or not. So normally the worms are at bay until they get activated, then they start to terrorize the person's body. Back when Shinji put the aphrodisiac on Sakura, this caused the worms to go out of control and they started to be riled up again. They're more like security to keep Sakura from breaking conditions, and now that they've been awakened, from that point on in the story, they're gonna continue to torture her and she's gonna continue to lose her mind. So now that these grail pieces have been inserted inside of her, because Zouken did do this, he infused the grail pieces with the worms and placed it inside of Sakura. You have the worms fighting for this grail energy, and then you also have Medusa fighting for that same energy. This hurts her even more. So Kirei goes through a process where he tries to save her, he purifies her, he heals her of the poison, he extracted some of the crest worms, and he compared it to revitalizing somebody's heart. That's how serious it was. Kirei mentioned that he was able to remove most of the crest worms from her, but a good portion of them were buried too deep for him to do anything about it.
How do you even begin to do that? I'm sure he did it with Magecraft, but like, the fact that there were two embedded, bro, is nuts to me. That's so crazy. Whose freaky ass was on the script? Bro, Nasu is so annoying, bro, because he would give you the best dialogue. Like, some of the best dialogue I've ever like heard or seen in anime has come from Fate. But then he will throw this in there, and I'm like, dude, what the fuck, bro? Semen suckers? Like, brother, what? There are no giant women. That's true. He loves his giant kaiju women, bro. He loves that. True.
Portion of them were buried too deep for him to do anything about it. All he did was decrease her pain and cut off part of Zouken's influence. And he said this alone saved her life. If he didn't get involved, she would have been taken out at that point. One thing that needs to be pointed out again is that Zouken has three different bodies. He's got his avatar that's made completely of worms, which on a physical level technically makes him invulnerable because he has no actual form. And we've seen this a lot too. Every time you try to go for a hit on Zouken, he just turns into a pile of worms. So he can't be harmed by normal means. You have his main body, and then you have his backup body.
He's just got like a flipping flamethrower or something.
Sakura. And this is what needs to be taken out before you even begin to think that you're going to get rid of him. Because the way that Zouken operates now is less about the body and him continuing to feed his soul. He goes around feasting upon people in order to survive. And we've seen this with the scene, including the woman. You know,
yeah, Sakura did low-key get her get back here in this movie. Because I guess she did end up killing him. But I don't, again, chat, is it confirmed that Zouken was like died here? Because Zouken's one of those characters that just could always come back, man.
Found her, completely devoured her body, and when they got done feasting, the worms started to turn into him. So he has to keep digesting human flesh in order to keep his body going, or more specifically, keep his soul going.
Okay.
And Kurstorm is just in the background watching, and he explains to him that he's gonna continue to rot no matter what. He can't help it now. And that's why he has to keep doing this. Even though he can keep reforming his body, it doesn't stop his soul from deteriorating. But he chose the path of becoming an insect, so he just has to deal with it because he wanted to survive as long as he possibly could. And Curstorm asked him why even take the form of an old man, and Zouken told him this is the only thing I can take form of. It's gotten just that bad. You know, it's a stark difference between how he used to look, what we've seen in the flashbacks, and
damn, so the worm's got him looking ugly as shit. Cause he actually looked like he had some looks about him before. But it's the worms that make him look like this first.
FGO
ugly ass nigga,
as opposed to the corpse that we see now, due to that constant decrease in his soul's value. He even mentioned that he used to be able to survive for 50 years without going on this consuming rampage, but as of Stay Night, this has dropped down to a couple of months. So it's getting to a point where Zouken wouldn't be able to continue anyway. And I think that's why he went ahead and decided to push forward with the Grail Vessel idea when he did, because honestly, he was running out of time. In greater details, he's devoured thousands and thousands of people just to maintain his existence. And he actually hates himself for it. Because again, this isn't who Zouken wanted to be. He hates the fact that he turned himself into the worms and that he's rotting away at his core. And the same thing went with his personality. It's driven him insane. And naturally, that extends to everybody else that's around him. And you know, I've mentioned that they are carnivorous, but Cheryl managed to get away from them. So you do have a little window as long as you don't stay near them for a long time. But this doesn't have to be the case. There is a dead end where he experienced a variant of Zouken's worms that he's never seen before. And they were able to get up on his feet and straight up devour him at the ankles. And then they started to enter his body from the hole in his legs, eat his bones, and then eat the rest of his flesh on top of that. So it just goes to show, given the opportunity, they will do it. Even when Kirei got rid of his avatar, when he exercised it in Heaven's Field.
This was fire, by the way.
The main body, Zouken was still able to survive.
This shit was
As I mentioned before, his worms have incredible observation. You see them at times.
Y'all remember this scene, bro? Kirei popped the
doing his
fuck off.
patrols, or when they're heading off into the cavern. They're everywhere. We've seen these worms completely take over Medea's corpse and use them for his own version of puppet manipulation. Now that's something that's extremely powerful. How do you take over somebody else's body and start to use their moves with just the worms? For something to be the lowest scale, that's actually extremely good. But how many times have we heard that saying anyway? Oh, well, normally this Magecraft wouldn't be effective, and then the person turns out to make it more effective than ever. This is just one example. I personally feel like there is tons of things that we haven't seen from Zouken. He's been around for so long, nearly won the Third War. Even when Prelati was trying to observe the Fifth Grail War in Strange Fate, and I've mentioned that in her video, Zouken was boxing her out from every angle with just his worms. He had the whole thing secured. Every time she tried to get in,
this Strange Fate
the worms devour her body. And this is Prelati we're talking about. She's more than equipped to deal with something like this. And here you have Zouken.
Look at my niggas right there, child. Look at my guys, dude. Look at my favorite guys, bro. Weevil Velvet and Iskander. Bro, these are my guys, dude. I miss Phaser just because of these two.
To deal with something like this. And here you have Zouken in the last stretches of his life still can't get in on him. And it just goes to show how difficult it is to get around them. And then you have his backup body. This dude really thinks things out. This man had a backup plan for the backup plan.
That's
so
what
on top
I be
of
saying.
The main body that's inside of Sakura, when Sakura smashed his core, the one that controlled everything, he was able to stuff his soul into a backup body that allowed him to survive even that. And of course, you know that eventually he still perished along with the rest of the cave, but it's just the thought of his survival. Even going back to Shinji's flashback, when he was in the worm pit, when he was speaking upon what happened with his mother was only recognized to be a carrier. She wasn't even a real mother, a surrogate to Zouken. And when she didn't produce the results that he wanted, he just threw her into the basement and let the worms have their way. Shinji said that he probably could find her body, I mean, but he had no desire to look. Not because it's his mom, it's like, I don't want to see my mother like that. It's because he cursed his mother for giving him failure genetics. So he doesn't want to see her at all.
This is why, if you go and look at my Heavensville reactions, you will see every time Shinji appeared on the screen. What did I do, chat? We played the fucking sound. Now, if I still had if I had a soundboard right now, chat, I would be spamming the fuck out of that sound, bro. But we played that sound, bro. And that's why if you go to my Heavensville, every time you played on screen, chat, I made the conscious effort to edit in the sound, bro. Every single time. What a scumbag. What a fucking... I hate him.
Out of spite. There's also the scene with Ilya, who mentioned that Zouken had intentions on taking over Sakura's body altogether. Once her personality withered away, Zouken would have took her over too. It just never ends with this man.
Crazy, chat. Zouken has to be up there, like the top 10, even top 5 menaces in this entire like Fate series, whatever, Nasuverse. Like, that guy is diabolical, bro. Diabolical. But yeah, good video right here. Who is it by? Let's see. Forgot his name. T-Sire. I'm gonna leave his YouTube in the link in the description. Go check him out. He does a load of fake stuff. But yeah, listen, Zouken, menace. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Psycho, team from the coast in Tokyo. Never thinking else, that's a no-no. Never thinking else, that's a no-no. Mob shit, be psycho.